Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. We're also live on Facebook and on YouTube. And it's a Wednesday health focus here right before Thanksgiving. And we're glad to have with us here Dr. Fernando Melaragno. He is an endocrinologist with LECOM Health. And every year we like to have Dr. Melaragno come talk about the endocrine system because it is Diabetes Awareness Month, and it has a lot to do with all of that. You've taught us about metabolic disease.
That's right. Yes, we've talked about.
And also we stay positive with this thing usually.
I think it's the right thing to do, right? Not too dissimilar to how I approach my patients, right?
Yeah.
There's no good to come out of a negative conversation. Blame is never the right approach. And some of my patients have felt that way in their previous experiences. They might have been led to feel that their obesity, specifically talking about nutrition and obesity as our topic, and which leads to the risk of diabetes.
Sure.
They felt that sometimes they're led to be felt that it's their fault. But the reality is obesity is a disease. It has all the defining characteristics of a disease. You're predisposed to it genetically. There's not much you can do about it in every situation. And it has consequences, symptoms associated with it, and progression and worse outcomes if it's not treated. Just like you would define any other disease that is more easily understandable. But obesity is a disease. And for that, we like to treat it and prevent those complications. Prevention is one of my key factors of an endocrinologist, because our diseases, if not treated, are going to lead to more problems.
I in another conversation, I was talking to a representative of one of the healthcare systems, the insurance companies. Okay, and they threw out a stat of over 70% of Americans now are either overweight or obese.
Right.
70%?
Well, so obese is a BMI of 30 and above. And so what's a BMI? It's a metric we try to use to standardize this situation. And it takes into consideration your height and your weight. And it gives you a score. So BMI over 30 is obese. So a little lower than that is overweight. 25 to 30 is overweight. So now you've got even a lower parameter to call somebody overweight. But obesity is, for the average adult male of average height, it's a weight of 200 pounds or more.
So if you're over 200,
if
you're
an average
more
male,
likely obese. Yeah. An
average male of average height. For a female, over 170 pounds of average weight and average height falls into that obese category, which we've had as long as we've been monitoring these statistics through the CDC, the World Health Organization, Gallup surveys. We've only gained weight every single year until recently. So in 2022, we hit a max of 40% of United States adults met the obese criteria. And then, yes, you throw in overweight, and we're talking number 70%. But 22 is when it peaked in the midst of all our COVID and everything, right? And then it was gradually dropping, and it most recently, the first couple quarters of 2025, we're looking at the numbers, and it's 37%. So that 40% of obese adults has fallen to 37%.
So it's almost 10%. Yeah.
40 to 37.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty significant. And we might say, why, right? Why? And there's a lot of we're looking into a lot of the reasons why, but we can all wonder if it's related to the shot, right? The poke, the stick, whatever we're calling it. GLPs and all these agents that have weight loss associated with them. So the Gallup poll, the survey, showed the weight loss primarily seen in the 40 to 64-year-old age group. And that also mirrors the individuals in that survey that had the most involvement with GLP use.
So we're not necessarily seeing the GLPs for younger folks just yet.
Well, not so much. So in those surveys, the greatest weight loss was not seen in the younger people, the very younger people, and the older people.
Well, let's make it clear that if you have a diagnosis of either prediabetes or diabetes, you might be able to get your Ozempic covered,
right? So
as opposed to Wegovy as a weight loss.
There's
drug,
a distinct line here. There's those with type 2 diabetes and those without type 2 diabetes. And we have to re-clarify. We kind of cover this each time, but so these molecules were first conceived for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Byetta, exenatide was the first one that came out 20 years ago, 2005, and many have come a long way since then. And in recent years, we've realized, and just a few years ago, that these molecules have weight loss associated with them, and wondered if they would be safe in non-diabetics. And they were proven safe in non-diabetics, and then they were approved, and then they were rebranded. So, for example, Ozempic is the number one we think of most, but that's for type 2 diabetes. It's semaglutide. The weight loss version of that is Wegovy, same molecule. But that's for people who have a BMI of over 25 plus 2 weight-related comorbidities, or over 30, obese, period. And that was the criteria. But some different insurances are actually pushing that higher. So now some insurances want a BMI of 40 and above.
Okay. Without diabetes, it's kind of hard to even find somebody with a BMI over 40 that doesn't have diabetes.
Yeah, exactly. But they are these are expensive molecules, expensive meds, expensive shots, how they're delivered. And there's many efforts trying to lower these prices, and we hear a lot of that happening.
Can I ask you about, and again, I don't know enough, so I really am relying on your expertise here. It seems like there is kind of the run-of-the-mill Ozempic or Wegovy. And then there seems to be these kind of super drugs like Mounjaro or Zepbound. What are those?
So the most there's many on the docket, and there's more coming.
There's more coming. Okay.
There's more coming.
But they seem to have a lot of power behind them.
So the newest one is tirzepatide, and that is Mounjaro, the weight loss version. These are weekly injections we're talking about. A person does this shot on their own every week. Mounjaro is the diabetic. And then Zepbound is the weight loss version.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Same molecules, the same concept as Ozempic and Wegovy.
Yeah.
We have Mounjaro is the diabetic med, and Zepbound's the weight loss
What's
med.
the difference from
So this molecule does two different things. So all the ones we've talked about thus far are GLPs. We hear that term too, GLP-1 agonist, glucagon-like peptide. It's mimicking a hormone in our body that does many of the things that we would define as metabolism, how we burn energy, release energy, how we burn fat, how our gut absorbs nutrients, how we have satiety, how our brain knows when we're full. These aren't stimulants. These aren't things that have you, these are mimicking the molecules in our body that do all the magic behind the scenes that all our bodies have. Yeah. So we already have these molecules in our body, but there's some of the things that are failing that lead to type 2 diabetes, that lead to obesity, and we're able to give it back. So the newest agents are dual action, GLP, GIP. Glucose independent polypeptide is a GIP. So what's special about that one is it will help stimulate insulin release with the use of your glucose level. So it is aware of your glucose level, so it is doing it in an appropriate type of way, glucose-dependent, insulinotropic polypeptide. So what I mean by that is this medication will release relative to your glucose levels being on the higher side in order to release insulin, which of course takes glucose out of your bloodstream and into the cells that need them.
So is there, when you're, as a practitioner, when you're seeing numbers, let's say A1Cs of 8s and 9s and 10s, you have to go for like the bazooka, the Mounjaro?
Well, you might say that to some extent.
I mean, is that an accurate statement to say?
Well,
Mounjaro might be more of a strength than Ozempic, or
it's known to have more weight loss. So yes,
it does, yeah,
there is a little bit more.
I mean,
weight
I'm hearing
loss.
about people losing 100 pounds on like Zepbound.
The weight loss is remarkable, but it's concomitant. These patients do require education. So people that fail on these medications never receive the proper education, and they didn't change their eating habits, behaviors, and they still maybe try to eat as much as they used to, and then they feel nauseous. They blame the medication. They stop. Now it's a failure. That patient is no longer able to be treated in that pathway. So education is critical. But yes, so these newer agents absolutely have remarkable weight loss associated with them. You do need to meet the criteria for your insurance to pay for it. You see a lot of other avenues online and different things that are out there. Those are not FDA approved. So those are compounding pharmacies. It's kind of a loophole where they have the ability to mimic that molecule, add something to it, and kind of bypass the FDA. And now you don't know exactly what you're getting. They first were approved during the emergency status when there were shortages of all these medications.
Okay.
And they seem to have kind of grandfathered in a little bit. They're still around. I don't generally recommend those because they're not FDA approved. How could I recommend something that we don't know if it's safe? But I certainly have a lot of patients that are utilizing them. And if I'm willing to participate with those individuals if they there's no other situation where insurance will not cover it. The out-of-pocket cost is too great. The need is significant, and yes, we could consider compounding.
Let me ask you about the A1C for a second here, because again, when do you first, maybe when does a family physician, I should say, first ask for an A1C screening?
So standard blood work will have a glucose as part of it, a blood glucose level.
Okay, that's like
that's
a
annual.
number.
That's a number. Over 100 fasting, that's too high. That's their glucose.
Over 100.
Yes, that's too high if you're getting regular fasting blood work. An A1C of 5. Now the A1C is a different number. It's not related to the sugar. It's a percentage, and it represents your sugar average over the last 3 months. 6.5 and above is diabetes. And so a family doc would get annual blood work. They would appreciate that patient's family history as a major risk factor. If there's diabetics in the family, type 2 diabetics in the family, if their weight is overweight, there's even some signs and skin changes and different things that a person should appreciate that there's some risk going on. And then they would pick up that A1C. There's even something called an insulin resistance panel. That is a pre-diabetic marker. We see that the patient is making extra insulin just to control their sugars. Their insulin levels are rising in order to try to control their sugars, and that's something called prediabetes. Yeah. And that's an important point that I want to go over. Prediabetes is an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. So you would say below 5.7 is perfectly normal. Your sugars are normal all the time, and you're good. That prediabetic area, it's for the patient that's been told they're borderline over the years. They've been told they're borderline, they're close. Well, prediabetes is not something that has no risk associated with it. It isn't like, well, you're not diabetic yet, so you're not going to have any problems yet. But no, you do have, there is risk associated with prediabetes, increase in cardiac disease, and increase in strokes. But you can treat prediabetes in a way that a person never has to become a diabetic. Prediabetes might imply, oh, this is just my stage before I become a diabetic. No, you're at risk of becoming a diabetic. There's a fork in the road, and you will either progress or you don't have to. So you might say, is diabetes curable? Well, it kind of is. If you are able to treat all those factors, take a person to a place where they're eating healthier, they are more active, they're healthier, they're taking the right medications, their sugars are controlled. They don't have the complications of being a person who has high sugars. The high sugar is what does the damage. That's what is causing the damage in the body.
So you could go high and come back low, but
yeah.
Are you going back into pre-diabetes?
Well, we wouldn't call it pre-diabetes. You would say well-controlled.
Well-controlled.
So you still are a person who, if you went off the rails...
They're still prescribed as a type 2 diabetic.
You shouldn't really take that diagnosis away, because that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because that person, if they...
do they call it remission? Do they ever call it remission?
Yeah, that term has been used as well.
If you're able to stay at 5.5, what the heck?
Yeah. Well, there's the diagnosis code that we use, in our our medical records, is uncontrolled diabetes or controlled diabetes.
Oh, okay,
those are the two
word.
terms.
Yeah.
But all those other terms are thrown around all the time. But if you can have a place where a disease that you're able to prevent from giving you the big trouble down the road.
Yes.
You would take advantage of that, right?
Sure,
You know, say cancer, heart, something terrible. If you were told early on that, hey, let's just do these few things, you'll never have to have those terrible complications down the road. Most people would do those things, but they just need to be made aware. They need to know that prediabetes is a risk factor. There is problems associated with it, and you can stop diabetes with the right. So there, you know, so what do people do that's listening? Well, boy, you know, am I borderline? Am I pre-diabetic? I was thinking, what could I offer? So there's a website, doihaveprediabetes.org.
Yeah.
You even hear it on the radio commercial sometimes.
Yep.
I checked it out. There's just 5 simple questions. You're not putting any of your own information in it. You know, you're not no name, no nothing. You're just putting in your age, just a couple little clicks, and then you get a real score how much at risk you are of becoming a diabetic.
Wow.
And then you should take that to your doctor, basically, right? Take that to your doctor and say, boy, you know, we've talked about my sugars being a little high, you know, in recent blood work, but this shows my score is high. I have a high risk of becoming diabetic. What can we do about this? So what can the average person do? So when we talked about the weight coming down, the obesity.
Well, hold on,
Yes.
hold that thought.
Yes.
Let's go to the break because
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like we want to get everybody's attention on this here. Dr. Melaragno is with us. What can you do if you feel or your numbers are coming back a little high? Dr. Melaragno will give you the recipe. And did you bring any recipes, by the way?
No, I do like to cook. I do. I have some plans for Christmas, but Thanksgiving, I leave that to the professionals, the moms in my life. Yes.
Dr. Melaragno is with us here. You know, I treat this hour as like, you know, we're giving several thousand Erie'ites a free consult from LECOM Health. So thank your officers there, the Freddies and
this
everybody.
is my day off too. You know, I'm not even working today. I'm not in my tie. I came from home, not the office. So, well, I know where to go. I'm from Erie, so you know I'm not traveling anywhere for the holidays. Well, so happy to be here.
All right, we wanted to kind of hear those pro tips on obesity and things like this.
Right, nutrition. Yeah, so you know the eating holidays are here, right? That's what I call it with my patients. You know, with that first visit after winter, I see my diabetics roughly every 3 months, and when I see them after winter, after the holidays, after we've been hibernating, we all are kind of ready to see an A1C that bumped up a little bit, you know, and the weight that went up a little bit. It happens almost every time, that first visit after the holidays, after winter, and then we have to kind of work our way back down. So why does that happen? Well, you know, we're allowed to celebrate and we're allowed to eat food and enjoy it, but there's all things in moderation, right? There's that. We can't deny that. We know when we're overeating. How do we prevent it? Well, education, work with your doctor, nutritionists, other resources we have in our field here, but ultimately, it's an appreciation of carbohydrates really being the main culprit. Protein, amino acids, we require those. Those are called macronutrients. We have to have those in our body. We cannot build our body, have a body, without having a certain amount of protein. And there's essential fats. Fats were demonized in the 80s. They tried to pull them out
Still
of everything. And they're not. They shouldn't be, and they aren't. Our bodies require fat. It's a macronutrient that we must have, that we would die if we didn't properly have.
Can I pause here a second? This is, again, this is my editorial comment. This is not the views of anybody else except me. But I keep hearing, and I talk to nutritionists that are pushing this low-fat, high-carb, everything from from salad dressings to mayonnaise. Like they're pushing the artificial junk, Doc, and I don't understand it.
I haven't heard much of that. I'd love to for you to share those with me. I'd like to see what they are. Well, just let's think about this. We cannot go out into nature and pick a bagel off of a tree. Like right. There's no loaf of breads that we could stumble upon. We're not meant to. Although we can digest carbohydrates and we can derive the energy out of them, that doesn't mean we should be. We're omnivores, right? It's carnivores. A lion can only eat meat, and that's how they survive, etc. That's what they need. And then there's herbivores, right? They eat plants, and they're designed exactly to that. Well, we're designed to be omnivores. We can eat meats and plants and derive energy from it, and that's how we build our body. From macronutrients coming from amino acids, from protein, from the fats. We require fats. And then there's micronutrients, certain vitamins and minerals and whatnots that we require that we easily achieve from eating a well-balanced, regular type of diet. Carbohydrates we do not require. We simply do not need them. What do we see people that eat carbs? An athlete would carb load, right? So before the big soccer game, you'd eat a big bowl of spaghetti. They carb load because they're about to expend an exorbitant amount of energy. And they can utilize the way carbohydrates function for that energy source. The rest of us are carb loading and then Netflixing, right?
Right.
So
there's no burn on the other side.
There should not be. There's no burn. So the weight continued to climb with that trend. So in general, enjoy your stuffing tomorrow. Absolutely, 100%. Well, of course I will. But like I said, all things in moderation. And to your point, right? There's no good reason to try to incorporating more carbohydrates in our in our diet. There's simply no reason for that. So I don't know. There's no reason for that.
Right. I mean, again, look at your favorite salad dressing and see what the top 3 ingredients are. If they're not like real things like olive oil, well,
that's another great point. If your food should have sort of one-word ingredients.
Yeah.
Chicken. Tomato, right?
Yeah.
Right. Let's keep it. The Mediterranean diet, year after year, is proven as the #1 diet that's healthy and effective for weight loss and for disease prevention.
And it's easy for 2 Italians to say that on the
Well, it's so true, though. I do agree. Yeah.
We're talking to Dr. Fernando Melaragno. He's with us here. He's an endocrinologist from LECOM Health. Back after the news.
Yeah, a little bit more to talk about maybe.
Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live on Facebook and YouTube on the video here, as well as, of course, on FM and live on our videos or our audio stream. Listen live now button. Also on, the smart speakers and the app and the whole bit. We've got Dr. Fernando Melaragno. He's an endocrinologist at LECOM Health. We're talking about Diabetes Awareness Month here. I did a quick Google search, and it led me right to the doihavediabetes.org. And they say, I'm sorry, do I have pre-diabetes? Excuse me. Reversing diabetes starts here. 1 in 3 American adults has pre-diabetes. Find out if you're at risk so you can reverse it before it becomes type 2 diabetes. That really is, you do have kind of some runway that you can make some positive change, right?
Well, absolutely. You could look at it as a ticking time bomb. Whatever analogy resonates with you, that it's not just something you can ignore. It left at its own devices, it will progress. Mm-hmm. And now you have a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, which you otherwise may have had an opportunity to never have had. So what do you do? How can you reduce your risk of becoming a diabetic? If you know your sugars are high, if there's a strong family history, if you know your weight is higher than it should be. Like I said earlier, have that conversation with your doctor. See what education you could achieve. Maybe there's certain things in your diet that you didn't know were so bad, and now and once you learn, you can make those changes. Maybe there's some healthy foods that you haven't tried yet that you can learn from some literature and from a nutritionist potentially. But ultimately, it comes down to portion control, which these medications certainly help, and even cravings. So one of the reasons these medications work, it even affects cravings. So by how it centrally works in the brain, and that there's also a link. So I wanted to come back to the weight loss. We've finally seen obesity kind of improving. We see it coming down in our country, and at first we attributed it to these medications, but there's other factors. Far and away, people are using sort of apps and things, smart technology, the step counter and all those things on our smart devices.
Yeah.
So those coincide. The weight loss that we've seen in this country over the last few years has coincided with an increased use of all those things. There's also less alcohol consumption. Young people are drinking less alcohol. So we know those as empty calories. So weight gain is associated with alcohol. And then there's also sort of maybe binge eating and these types of things. Poor eating habits is sort of tied into alcohol too. So young people and adults alike are drinking less alcohol in recent years, which I think is only a good thing. Is it attributed to some of these agents too, and the cravings and addictions? It's possible. Mm-hmm. There's also an obvious increase in this. There's an increase in fitness as well. So these apps of fitness are being used more, and in general, young people, middle-aged people are being more active, in athletics and exercise. So a lot of things are going the right way. So give credit where credit is due. Mm-hmm. These individuals are making those strides.
Why do you think that if we were to go back 50 years, if we went back to the bicentennial? And, there wasn't as much obesity in the 70s and what have you, but you had more smoking, right? You probably didn't have the sedentary. How much is activity important here, Doc?
A good, yes. One of the things I remind my patients, they eat their breakfast, they eat their lunch, at work, and then dinner's the largest meal here in America, right? And it's what happens between dinner and bedtime. And I can see this in my patients that have continuous glucose monitors. They're wearing a device on their skin that shows their sugar all the time. They're diabetics that are on insulin, for example, and they use this tool. And I can see the sugar climb. A little bump at breakfast, a little bump at lunch, a little bump at dinner, and then it goes up before bedtime. And I can say, what's happened here? And 9 times out of 10, it's the poor eating habits that happen. It's the unconscious eating that happens on the couch, those types of things. That is where the epidemic of obesity primarily originates from.
Wow.
Right there. So I remind patients to cut some of that out. They kind of think it's their free time, it's their relaxation time, etc. But it has a consequence, right? There's a consequence to that. So we change some of those behaviors, and lo and behold, I can see the numbers drop on the next time they come in with their readings, and their weight and their A1Cs and everything are following.
Interesting. Our phone number is lit if you want to ask Dr. Melaragno a question, 814-679-1080, 814-679-1080. Let's look at what is on the horizon here because honestly, I think from the time that we had our first conversation, I think Ozempic was just kind of becoming a brand name that we learned about 3-4 years. Even though the concept's been around for 20 years, they Novo Nordisk. I mean, my understanding is that it's basically half of the economy of Denmark. It's incredible.
Right. It's true.
But that was just coming online now. Right. It's huge. Right. But I'm sure there's something coming.
Well, the way information is shared these days is so remarkably different than 50 years ago, and et cetera. Yeah. So everybody knows everything kind of at once. And then when there's the influencers and things, then and it just explodes. So it becomes mainstream, becomes everyone talks about it.
Right.
There are several agents, being actively studied in different tiers of the studies soon to be released that mimic these same types of concepts, molecules that are mimicking hormones in our body.
I hear that they're going to have a oral GLP-1 or oral Ozempic, basically.
Right. No, for weight loss, it's not approved yet, but the oral version of Ozempic, called Rybelsus, is something that's out now.
It's out now. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not. But the weight loss version isn't out
but
yet.
For diabetes.
Yeah, so for diabetes, so if efficacy is awfully similar and side effect profile awfully similar to what we all know as Ozempic, the weekly shot, I think it lends itself to some people wanting, thinking it's something maybe special. I want that shot. Everybody has the shot. They're doing something unique. And maybe that helps them even mentally change their ways a little bit. But the repaglinide the Rybelsus is a pill version once a day, just like Ozempic, with very similar outcomes.
Does it go? I mean, a lot of folks are on metformin, which is kind of an artificial insulin, right?
No.
What is metformin?
So that is an old medication. It's a class of its own. And it does a lot of things, but it focuses on some of the insulin resistance that we talked about earlier. It
does.
Yeah, when you have patients who have insulin resistance, their body has to make extra insulin just to try to control their sugars. It's sort of the definition of type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. Your cells don't respond to your insulin the way that it should, and those sugar levels rise, and all the repercussions of that follow. Metformin's still a good tool. It's sort of the art of medicine. We got a lot of different tools in the toolbox, and sometimes we got to reach for an old one to do the job. I might just add some metformin to a patient who's on one or two other medications, and lo and behold, it was the trick that was needed. So you kind of asked earlier, do we need the big guns? When do we use what and when?
Right. Yeah.
The American Diabetes Association, the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, they've all offered guidelines along the way, and for the longest time, the guidelines were very sort of systematic. Use metformin, and then pick something from this class of medications, then something from that class of medications, and then the last one is sort of insulin, right? We all know that as that's the final one. I don't want to go on insulin because that's sort of the sledgehammer. Insulin would absolutely bring down your glucose. That's what it does. But do we need to reach to that right away? No. Nobody wants to start.
And that's a lifestyle that's really tough to live with.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. If you're at the point where you need insulin with each meal, that's a shot with each meal. And then you're taking your long-acting, your 24-hour insulin once a day as well. But what the guidelines have changed now, where we're not regimented to try to choose something from one and then the other. We can start almost anywhere, you might say. So what fits that patient the best, from their side effect profile, from their tolerability, from finances, cost, coverage, insurance. All these things are taken into consideration when I'm having my plan with my patient. I don't just say start this medication, send them on their way, unknowing if it's covered or not. That doesn't my patient no good. That is all determined at the time of the visit. We're clarifying all these things. before they leave. So, but yes, there are newer ones coming out. They're using other types of hormones in our body, not just the couple that we talked about.
Yeah.
These will be weekly shots. There'll be some future pills coming out. So in the next year or two, truly some are coming out relatively soon, but in the next several years, a lot of these studies will be concluded, and we're going to have newer agents that have these remarkable outcomes.
What's the goal here? Is it literally to cure obesity?
I mean, we have some pretty remarkable tools. I stopped counting the amount of patients that lost 100 pounds. At first it was remarkable. Wow, we have my third patient, my fifth patient, my 10th patient. So we have a huge dent in the obesity epidemic.
And they're not regaining it?
No. So that's the other question everybody asks. I'm sure I have some listeners like, well, do I have to be on this forever?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Will I gain it back? Well, it depends on the person, right? So if you started out as an individual that just really ate very, very poorly, they didn't have any good concept of what they should or shouldn't eat, their activity level is very, very poor. And then through this journey, they're taking their medication, their sugars are getting better, they're losing weight. They are eating better because they have to. It's just part of how the medication works. If you overeat, you won't feel well. So they go through this journey, and at the end, they're very different. By the end, what I mean is their A1C is at goal, their weight is at goal, and they've progressed upwards. These medications are gradually titrated upwards for tolerability more and efficacy. So you start kind of low and you increase, like so many medicines, right? We get to our goal, and then we back down on the dosing. You start stepping back down. How much is needed to really maintain? So that patient might be on a fraction of their maximum dose, and they're maintaining. Can they come off it completely? They can, and it really just depends on how much they're going to stick to those major changes that have evolved from when they started the journey at the beginning of it all. So do I have patients that have stopped it completely? Sure. Many? No, maybe not many.
Yeah.
Do I have a lot of patients that are at their goal and they're on a very low dose? Yes, it is. I do. But we wouldn't necessarily say that about any other disease. Like, say this medicine is keeping their cancer at bay. It's keeping them from having a stroke, a heart attack, etc. You're going to stay on that, right? You're not going to say, I need to come off. When can I get off that? Well, no, bad things happen if you get off it. So,
do you see that your patients that have reached goal are using less meds in the other metabolic systems, like their hypertension meds and some of the other stuff?
Well, I see
their statins for.
Yes. No, great point. I see it, and all the studies have seen it as well. So as these patients improve metabolically, how they're functioning on the inside, and as the weight has come off, mm-hmm. their blood pressure is improving. Their blood pressure medications are coming down. Their cholesterol is improving, and their cholesterol medications are being reduced or potentially discontinued if it came to that. Their insulin requirements, that's one of the most remarkable things. I'm able to, once a patient is on these agents and they're doing well and their weight's coming down, insulin's a relatively weight-based type of medication, so they're losing weight. They're able to their insulin is able to be reduced, and much of the time they're able to come off their insulin. They don't need that wrecking ball tool to knock down their glucose because we've had some other medications doing the job. Mm-hmm. And now you have to reduce the insulin doses, in fact, or else you're going to have a low sugar, a hypoglycemic event. Our diabetics on listening, nobody wants to have that. Those are very dangerous. Those are life-threatening. These medications that we've talked about, these ones that mimic hormones in our body, and all the medications for the most part do not cause low sugars. It's insulin that causes lows. And a little caveat, a class called the sulfonylureas, glipizide, glimepiride, glyburide, those can cause low sugars. So those medications need to be reduced or discontinued as we progress with their treatment plan and lower their sugars by the other means. You don't need as much insulin anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting. Your job is pretty interesting to me because here you are dealing with, again, this metabolic disease that a lot of Americans are dealing with, but you also have to deal with these young people and these children with type 1, which is a whole different disease.
That is a whole different disease.
I mean, but it's a tragic diagnosis that
Right,
is
right.
really tough on parents and kids.
Right. So 95% of diabetics are type 2 diabetics.
Yes.
Everything we've been talking about up to this point. 5% of diabetics are type 1 diabetics. And it's a completely different disease process. The only thing they have in common is glucose, you might say.
Yeah.
So type 1 diabetics can't make insulin. They cannot make it. And if they don't receive it, they will die. It's as simple as that.
That's horrific.
So you're born with, or you could have something called LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes of adulthood. An adult can suddenly have type 1, and that's a surprise, and that's something they need to see an endocrinologist for. So that's a different type of disease, absolutely. But yes, I have those patients as well, of course.
And then also, do you deal with thyroid and all that?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about diabetes because far and away, diabetes is the most prevalent endocrinopathy, endocrine disorder. But in my practice, we cover all the endocrine diseases.
I was going to say, you hear about these people that have thyroid cancer that, they have to get zapped.
They should see an endocrinologist. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So many of my patients are thyroid patients, adrenal patients, hypogonadism,
and that affects
disorders.
weight too, doesn't it? Your thyroid?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. An underactive thyroid, weight gain is one of the key symptoms associated with it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So
the concept of the eating and the movement is still the thing. That this is why the obesity is the number one preventable disease in America and around the world.
That is true. That is absolutely true. There's a certain genetic component, but can we call it one of the most treatable, preventable diseases in the world? It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Yeah.
It's unreal. Wow. We've got to go. I appreciate you taking the time here.
Our time. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing what we are dealing with as a society, and we're just thankful that smart people like you are there to help us. And I'm glad that the community itself and even the free market, this capitalism that we live with, but it is actually creating good solutions. We're saving lives through modern medicine.
Yeah, the research and development will never, cease in this department. Diabetes is a world, encompassing problem. So yes, we'll always be supported by research and development and companies that can come up with new ways of treating it for their benefit, and of course for all of our benefit as well. Yeah. One of the things I like about my specialty, there's always something new coming for me to utilize to help my patients.
Yeah. Dr. Fernando Melaragno, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Let's all eat the fun stuff, but in moderation.
Yes, I guess in moderation. Yes,
yeah.
Have fun.
Yeah, probably soda's the worst, isn't it?
Soda is the worst. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That exact phrase is said in my office often. Soda's the worst. No, I grew up drinking pop and all these things. We all did, right?
Sure.
But no, pop is one of the absolute worst.
It just doesn't. I mean, with all due respect to our manufacturers, it just doesn't do us a whole lot of good.
No, it's not.
Thanks
it's not
so much,
healthy.
Doc. Appreciate
You're welcome.
it.
Thank you.
I've got 2 minutes left, and we held Dr. Melaragno over here. I want to get to it here because what you just told us during the break, Doc, I want you to repeat for our listeners here.
No,
what is this called now?
So we started talking about something called fatty liver. The term was called NASH for many years, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And I'm sure a lot of people have been told they have this. They could see it in incidental imaging. They did an X-ray or something looking for something else.
Would it come up in a blood scan?
No, not unless it's looked for.
Okay.
So it's usually incidentally seen maybe on a CAT scan for a belly that you're getting for some other reason. And then the radiologist will comment the fatty deposition in the liver. So what is this? This isn't just so the risk factor is obesity and type 2 diabetes. And this isn't just a fatty liver because a person has fat everywhere in their body. It's sort of a disease process in and of itself. The liver has sort of chosen or sort of been forced to deposit more fat into the liver. And it's related to the fake sugars too. The liver doesn't know what to do with these fake sugars, and it kind of stores it into fat. And then this liver is getting predominated by fat, and then fibrosis and inflammation, all bad things. It's the leading cause of cirrhosis, secondary to alcoholism. So it's now termed MASH, metabolic dysfunction steatohepatitis. So they're saying like this is a metabolic disease. This is something like diabetes. And steatohepatitis just means sort of fatty liver inflammation, and ultimately it will lead to liver dysfunction. It is the leading cause of liver transplants in females in our country.
Lord.
So it's been ignored for a long time because all you could tell patients was, this is from 1980 is when this was first seen.
Yeah.
It's called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis because first they saw it in alcoholics, cirrhotic livers, fatty livers, and they knew alcoholics had livers that looked like that. And then they started seeing livers that looked like that in non-alcoholics. So they called it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. They didn't have any other understanding. Now we understand what it's associated with. And we have some distinct treatment regimens to reverse it. Not just treat it, but really pretty much reverse it. So there are certain labs that can be ordered, pretty straightforward screening labs.
Is this something that if you have the first two, which is diabetes and the obesity
should you be screened for it?
Yeah,
I'd love to see that in standard care in not too many years from now, to be quite frank, as a standard that everybody's utilizing. But yes, those are the risk factors that somebody should consider looking into it.
I'm glad you had us.
I thought I had a little more time. I thought I had until 5.
Right.
I was going to bring it up, but
so
I didn't realize.
It's called NASH.
NASH.
Ask your doctor about NASH.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Doc. Appreciate it.
Sure.